Welcome to the Ignition News. We love to have you here, but remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Click that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment below. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's get busy with the truth. Good morning, and welcome to the Ignition News. The world you woke up to this morning is not the same one that you went to bed with. We've got three stories today which represent fundamental cracks in the foundation of, well, I guess stability of society. And they all point to the same thing. The old way is clearly breaking in front of us, and the people at the top are scrambling to grab what they can before it falls to the ground. I know that doesn't sound like great news, but stick with me. I think what comes afterwards could be good for everyone. Let's start with the first one, which is certainly destabilizing. Let's start with oil, I guess, as we often do. Today, the UAE announced it is leaving OPEC. It's not a vague threat. It's actually going to be leaving OPEC. They're not talking about quotas or anything like that. They're just out. They're out on Friday, May 1st. After 60 years of membership in OPEC, the United Arab Emirates is out. And, do you know what OPEC actually is? In practice, it is a cartel. It's a group of major oil-producing nations that set production levels so they can keep prices high enough to fund their governments, high enough to keep the money flowing, but not so high that the global economy chokes on demand. It's definitely a delicate balancing act, and it's been impacting your life and economics for, your entire adult life. The UAE produces 4.8 million barrels of oil per day. They do have the capacity to produce much more, but OPEC has told them to hold back. They've been furious about that for many years, but tensions with Saudi Arabia, the dominant force of OPEC, have been building. But really what pushed this over the edge was Iran. Since the U.S. and Israel began Operation Epic Fury, the Strait of Hormuz has been under siege. The narrow choke point handles about 20% of the world's crude oil and LNG, liquefied natural gas. OPEC production collapsed 27% in March alone, and the war wiped out 8 million barrels of oil per day. That is a bigger supply than COVID, by the way, and much bigger than the 1991 Gulf War. The UAE's energy minister said directly that the disruption created by the war was the right moment to make the move. So again, what he said out loud was, the war that the United States started with your tax dollars, the war that has already hit your gas prices, is the event that fractured the global oil cartel that has dominated the oil supply since 1965. The consequences of this are going to be very real and very immediate. Saudi Arabia is now stuck doing more of the heavy lifting on price stability, and the UAE plans to ramp production up once the strait opens. So that means you're going to have a flood of oil hitting an oil market that's already in basically crisis. Rystad Energy put it plainly. The market just lost one of the few shock absorbers left that it had. This is what happens when you have imperial overreach. You throw chaos into a region, and then everything downstream of that starts to break. And our allies no longer see incentives to go along with the old way. OPEC was definitely a major influence in the global price of oil, and now you're adding a chaos factor into it. And we don't have an administration that has shown itself to be particularly good about managing that chaos. Let's move on to the next story because, believe it or not, it gets weirder from here. Here's the sentence that we've talked with before. Donald Trump is suing the government for $10 billion. Obviously, you know, back in 2019 and 2020, an IRS contractor named Charles Littlejohn, what a name, by the way, gained access to Trump's tax returns and leaked them to the press. We learned, among other things, that the president paid just $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017. Littlejohn was caught, pled guilty, and is now serving 5 years in federal prison. But Trump wants $10 billion. So in January of this year, he, along with Eric and Don Jr., his sons, sued the IRS and the Treasury Department. He's claiming they failed to protect his confidential tax information. Now, here is what a federal judge in Florida said today. Judge Williams in Florida said, through an order, she was questioning whether this lawsuit can even proceed. Her point is actually pretty simple and legally devastating. The president is the sitting president of the United States. The IRS and the Treasury Department are both agencies under his executive authority. He is their boss. He controls both sides of the lawsuit. She wrote, that what is unclear about this is like, who are the parties? And what is the legal standard here sufficient to be adverse to each other? A lawsuit requires real adversaries. If Trump is the plaintiff and also the boss of the defendant, there is no adversary. There is no case. There's just the president trying to extract billions of dollars of your tax money. And it does get worse. Trump's lawyers are already in settlement talks with the IRS, meaning Trump's private attorneys are negotiating with Trump's own government to settle a case where he is on both sides. A group of former government officials filed a brief called this what it is collusive litigation. They warned the court that this is an really extraordinary attempt to extract taxpayer funds through litigation for which the president himself controls both sides. For context, that $10 billion represents about 2/3 of the IRS's entire budget. If the president wins or settles it, it could effectively double his estimated net worth, paid for by you who pay your taxes. The judge has given both sides until May 27th to explain why the case should not be dismissed. She also has a hearing set for the same date. Of course, the president himself joked about this on Air Force One. He said, and this is a direct quote, that it is very interesting to be on both sides of a lawsuit. He floated donating the winnings to charity. Nobody would care, he said. Nobody would care. Well, cutting a third of the IRS's budget is something that you should care about. That's what happens when you have both sides of the case and you have the lawyers in the title. Now let's talk about something that actually gives me a little bit of hope. The S word. I don't say that lightly. The S word is not a slur anymore. Of course, I'm talking about socialism. Zohran Mamdani is 34 years old. He's the mayor of New York City, and he is a Democratic Socialist. He's been mayor for just over 100 days, and his numbers are doing something pretty interesting. Over 102,000 potholes filled, the most in any comparable period. New childcare slots are coming online. A city-owned grocery store is launching in East Harlem with one in every borough on the way. Faster buses, crackdowns on landlords, and a new pied-à-terre tax on luxury second homes worth more than $5 million that is expected to generate $500 million a year for the city. Mamdani said, when I ran for mayor, I said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today we're taxing the rich. The New York Times is trying to frame this as Mamdani succeeding despite his socialism, not because of it. They wrote that he is prioritizing brass tack projects over ideological ones. But that framing is fundamentally untrue. Filling potholes is socialism when the alternative to that is austerity and potholes. Building public grocery stores is socialism. Universal childcare is socialism. The ideology is not separate from the governments. The ideology is the governance. And no article or opinion in the New York Times can prove otherwise. By the way, yesterday in a separate forum, we covered how intellectually disconnected the New York Times actually is from the working class. Highly encourage you to check that out. And here's the part that broke MAGA's brains. On the very same day that House Republicans muscled through a resolution condemning socialism by a vote of 285 to 98, Donald Trump was sitting in the Oval Office gushing over Mamdani. Trump said the two have many similar ideas. He said he would be happily live in Mamdani's New York and praised Mamdani's campaign efforts. He said he even threw a kind word in for Bernie Sanders, by the way. Hakeem Jeffries voted for that anti-socialism resolution. 86 Democrats voted for it. The nominal leaders of the opposition party voted to condemn the ideology of the man who is currently running the most successful municipal government in the country. But Mamdani said it plainly. There is only one majority in this country. That is the working class. And it is time we have politics that put them at the heart of what we are pursuing, not just part of the appendix. And that's not radical. It's true. The fact that a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist is proving it all in real time in the middle of a war while Trump is raiding the Treasury and OPEC is falling apart matters more than the media is giving credit for. While the empire is fracturing at the top, people at the bottom are figuring out how to run their government by themselves and for themselves. You can hold both of these things true at once. Incidentally, this is not just my theory. This is not just a thought process. There's actually data behind this that shows this. I want to actually point out that there is an estimated 60,000 people who voted for Trump in New York who actually voted for Zohran Mamdani. And the ideology behind socialism is gaining increasingly, it's just getting more and more popular. It was once seen as politically toxic, but it is growing, according to a Times-YouGov survey. It's going to mark the nation's 250th anniversary. I'm sorry. It asked 1,821 people which philosophy could deliver the American dream for all, and it found that 21% of Americans said capitalism, compared to 16% who chose socialism. However, among Americans under 30 years, socialism came out on the top with 25% choosing it compared to 14% who chose capitalism. It's really not even nearing the top peak. We're seeing socialism ideology seeing support that it hasn't seen since Eugene Debs, the Socialist Party leader who won 6% of the national vote in the 1912 presidential election. The ideology is proving to be more popular than ever. The ideas are not as radical as we have been told, and more people are joining the Democratic Socialists of America. Popularity in DSA has ballooned from 5,000 in 2016 to now more than 100,000 people in the DSA. Among 18 to 29, Mamdani, he got 75% of their support. If you came out of the post-2008 era, this is a quote from the Times, the odds are that you have never had a chance to even believe that you could be financially comfortable out of the United States. That's a quote directly from the Times. And that's a sentiment that I think most of us actually feel. By the way, most of the data that I pulled from this does come from a really good article in the Times. And I think if you're looking for something inspiring, I'd encourage you to read it. I'll go ahead and put the link to this article in the show notes. I told you, there's 3 interesting stories, but we finished out on top. And the reason for that is that I happen to believe, and I think if you listen to my show, you believe as well, that there's a reason we're doing all of this struggle, all of this fighting, and a reason that you have not given up on this country yet. And as more of us come to understand the value of community and more of us come to understand the value of actually doing the work, well, then more of the work actually gets done, whether that's potholes or whether that's fixing up neighborhoods or whether that's building new community centers. The work is truly in our hands. So let's get our hands dirty and let's get to work. This is the Ignition News. Thanks for tuning in.